Ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, a throwback to a moment when Kash Patel most certainly was right, probably knew that he was right, probably still is right, but seems to have changed tact just somewhat, where it went from turning the FBI J. Edgar Hoover building into a museum to turning it into a museum so the FBI can get a bigger, better, newer office. He was right then, but I shall remind all of you of what he said back in the day. Behold!
The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big, and the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here? Looking for their next government promotion, looking for their next fancy government title, looking for their parachute out of government. So while you're bringing in the right people, you also have to shrink government.
You know what's amazing, actually, is if you listen to what Kash said right there with a little bit of the confession through projection blinders on, or filter, I should say, and if you then think that maybe that's what he's now potentially looking for. Set that aside. I don't really want to psychoanalyze what happened to Kash Patel, but the idea that they're looking for their parachute when they get out of government. They're looking for their own private jet. We might or might not get into that now. Kash Patel coming out and saying it's gotten too big. Its tentacles are everywhere. It needs to be shut down. I was talking with Kyle Sarapin before the show because there was an article that was recently published in Fox News, which we're going to go over before Kyle gets in here. And you know the term burying the lead? Forget exactly the origins of the term. Burying the lead. And it's not spelt the way you think it's spelled. It's spelled L-E-D-E. Origin. It's when you don't really highlight the most important part of the story and you put it somewhere down in the end part of the article where most people are not going to get. Burying the lead originated in mid-20th century American journalism to describe obscuring a story's most important information, or lead, deep within the text rather than leading with it. The specialized meaning of lead, L-E-D-E, was adopted to distinguish the opening paragraph from lead, a type of metal, in hot metal printing. That is the general idea of burying the lead. And if you want to understand that, this might not be a case of burying the lead. It might be a case of people not fully appreciating just how much of an absolute bombshell, devastating piece of information this is. And it might be why you need the likes of former FBI employees like Kyle Sarapin, like Steve Friend, who know how the agency operates, to understand that the bombshell of this article is in the mid to later section. This was published yesterday? Yes, yesterday, February 25. Biden's FBI subpoenaed Kash Patel's and Susie Wiles' phone records during federal Trump investigation. Special counsel Jack Smith obtained the records during federal probe into 2020 election and classified documents. Okay, we know it. We know that when the FBI gets weaponized, and I should say when, it's almost as though it's weaponized by its very existence. It's almost like the FBI is doing exactly what J. Edgar Hoover wanted the FBI to do, which was what it was created for. Set that aside. When it's corrupted, it's not just an intelligence agency. It's not just a corrupt organization. It is a threat to these United States of America and all who dwell within. You're going to get into this. You will not believe the story. All right, fine. Now we know. It's like it's become so common that nobody seems to be outraged by it anymore. Jack Smith spying on members of Congress. Oh, he didn't get the contents of their phone calls. He just knew who was calling when, for how long, on what dates. They subpoenaed Kash Patel, Susie Wiles' phone record. It gets even worse. It gets even worse if you can believe it. The FBI coerced, got the consent of Susie Wiles' attorney to record a conversation between her and her attorney without telling Susie Wiles. This is not justice. This is not Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is Stasi-level, Soviet-style East German spying. It needed to be shut down, like Kash said. He doesn't say that anymore. Maybe other interests are in there now. It doesn't matter. FBI subpoenaed Kash Patel, Susie Wiles' phone records in 2022-2023 when both were private citizens as part of a federal probe into then former President Donald Trump. Fox News has confirmed. Patel is the current FBI director, and Wiles is the chief of staff, White House chief of staff. At least 10 FBI employees were also fired Wednesday, Fox News told. Names were not given due to privacy reasons, with the FBI Agents Association later criticizing the firings. Oh, it's amazing, eh? You mean that what are they, unionized? The protected, corrupt TDS employees can't be fired without a fight, and you fire 10 of them in an agency of 35,000. It's not just a drop in the bucket, but what we're revealing right now is the most insidious type of corruption imaginable. The FBIAA condemns today's unlawful termination of FBI special agents, which, like other firings by Director Patel, violates the due process rights of those who risk their lives to protect our country, the organization said in the same. You want to talk about due process rights? How about letting people know that they're under surveillance for no good reason? How about that their solicitor-client privilege communications are being intercepted after having compromised the attorney? Quote, these actions weaken the Bureau by stripping away critical expertise and destabilizing the workforce, undermining trust in leadership, and jeopardizing the Bureau's ability to meet its recruitment goals, ultimately putting the nation at greater risk. You know, if the people who represent the criminals are upset, that you're making the right decision. I was joking with Kyle. This might be the first episode that I know of where Kyle actually gives credit to Kash Patel for this particular decision, this particular discovery, but it depends on what he does with this information. Reuters first disclosed the subpoenas, which were issued during the Biden administration, while Special Jack Counsel was investigating Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election and his handling of the classified documents Mar-a-Lago. All right. Smith ended up charging Trump. We covered this yesterday. Federal judge later dismissed the election interference case after Smith moved to drop it following Trump's re-election, citing Justice Department policy against prosecuting a sitting president. Smith also dropped the Justice Department's appeal, a separate ruling that dismissed the classified documents case. Trump has denied any wrongdoing. Yeah, okay. Let's get to the lead that has been thoroughly buried. Listen to this, and then you won't understand the depth of the depravity. I didn't fully understand the depth of the depravity, and I wonder if Fox News understands the depth of the depravity. I wonder if Kash Patel, I mean, he has to, presumably, but maybe not. Maybe it takes working at the FBI for nearly a decade to understand just how bad this is. In a statement to Fox News, Patel called the move to seize the phone records outrageous and deeply alarming. It's outrageous, deeply alarming that the FBI leadership secretly subpoenaed my own phone records along with those of the now White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, using flimsy pretexts and burying the entire process in a prohibited case files designed to evade all oversight. Pay attention to these words. Prohibited case files designed to evade all oversight. Do you know what it's called when an intelligence agency operates by evading all oversight? It's criminal organizations right now. That's not an organization that fights crime. That's a criminal organization. The FBI has found the phone records in files labeled as, quote, prohibited, Reuters reported. Patel said he recently ended the FBI's ability to categorize files as prohibited. That's nice. How do you do that? How do you do that so that if Democrats win in 2028, they don't just decide to open more prohibited files? We're going to get into what prohibited files are. By the way, listen to this. Fox News also learned from two FBI officials that in 2023, FBI agents recorded a phone call between Wiles and her attorney. According to those officials, Wiles' attorney was aware the call was being recorded. That's called consent. So Wiles' attorney consented to FBI recording solicitor-client discussions and consented, but Wiles was not informed. This is when you would go back to that clip of Kash Patel and you say, shut it all down. Smith testified last year that the records of members' calls helped investigators verify the timeline of events surrounding the January 6th Capitol riot. Oh yeah, because there was some confusion. You know, it was only documented in real time through the devices that were seized and the 1,600, how many people were arrested. He said prosecutors followed all legal requirements in getting those records, bullshit, and told a House panel that records obtained from lawmakers did not include content of conversations. Oh. A, why would we believe that? And B, big freaking deal. Holy hell. Now, when I was talking with Kyle, and he was explaining to me just how egregious prohibited files as a concept and a practice is. he's going to come in right now and tell us. It's the stuff out of it's the stuff out of novels. It's the stuff out of movies where you wouldn't believe it if you didn't know what happened. We all know what happens. At least we you know, the concept. Everybody makes jokes about it. You know, they have the secret rooms, yada yada. Kyle, sir, how goes the battle?
Today is tougher than many days.
Am I overreacting or am I underreacting?
No, you know what I like is whenever I come on your program, you always start off really animated, and that's how you start your shows. And then when I come on, you always like get calm and then try to steel man things, and you become the alternative. No, I love that. I love that interplay. You're not overblowing this. It's still washing over me, and I'm not a theatrical guy. I don't think we've ever had a theatrical conversation, but I was yelling while I was in the gym, and I had to leave the gym to go stand in the atrium to explain this to you, because
it confirms
I'm trying not to swear a lot. That's what's going on. And as you said, it depends on what they do with the information, but it is, I started tapping people because when I read that story, I was like, well, that's not even a real thing. There's no such thing as a prohibited file.
Hold on. Before
and we're gonna have to get really semantic and really sort of detail oriented so people can understand why this is and what this looks like from the outside. And then it's like, oh, that's why you have people. That's why we needed a deputy director who had like a couple of decades worth of experience in the FBI and knew what the dirty secrets look like. And by the way, I wasn't that guy, and I've never been that guy, and I've never claimed to be that guy. I never want to be that guy. And I'm really glad I didn't know that this existed, because I probably would have had to leave a lot earlier.
Let us not presume that everybody who's watching this, and when it goes into clip format, knows who you are. Very summarily, just give your credentials so that people understand you're not just some Canadian schnook who is a former Montreal litigator, that you've got understanding, and you can qualify it on a scale of 1 to 100, but you've got more understanding than most people out there.
I was in the FBI for 7 times longer than Kash Patel, 8 times longer than Dan Bongino. I was an FBI agent from 2016, suspended in the middle of 2022. And then I officially resigned or acknowledged that they hadn't paid me in 14 months in 2023. I was a whistleblower to Congress. I brought a bunch of different things to include showing that the FBI was investigating radical traditionalist Catholics who were involved in the Latin Mass. I showed that they were investigating parents at school board meetings. I did a lot of disclosures about FISA 702, which is kind of closer to what this is about. A lot of the sort of abuses of the intel component of the FBI. Shared stuff about what was going on at the military bases where we were housing Afghan refugees, and I was basically removed for a combination of reasons, which basically included I said I wasn't going to get the COVID shot, and then I also said I wasn't going to illogically test for COVID every 72 hours. Because I'm a Catholic and I'm not going to discriminate against myself just because I have these pro-life beliefs. And then at the same time, I was also bringing this whistleblower disclosures to my member of Congress. So I'm a political independent. I generally vote towards the Republican side. I'm a conservative political independent, but that's my background. That's where I'm coming from. So my expertise is not extreme, but I have really good sourcing, and I still have people inside the FBI who have 2 decades more experience than I do. So whenever I see something that looks wrong, I run it down. And what I saw was something that didn't look, I was like, that's not even a thing. That's not even a real thing, prohibited files, until you find out that it is.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get into, because when you're a layperson like myself, you'll read this and you'll read prohibited case files as, unlawfully opened cases, or cases that weren't authorized, or they were doing something prohibited. So I initially read it, in a very colloquial sense, and didn't make anything of it. You read this and you say, I've been in the agency. I've been there for, damn near a decade. You can round it up. What's this thing called a prohibited file? So explain, with, obviously protect your sources, but tell us what happens. You read this thing called prohibited files. It rings differently for you because you have knowledge of how this works, and you go look into it.
Yeah, there is no prohibited file for regular people. That's not a thing. So the way that it works is if you are an FBI agent or if you are an analyst and you're going to work on a case, the case is given a case number. So that's not crazy. And anybody who's been seeing FBI files of late, whether it be through the Epstein stuff or declassification or FOIA or whatever, you may see FBI case files. And a lot of people in January 6th saw these as well. And they have all these different designations. And if you know what to read, when you look at them, you go, okay, well, that's what this is. The first 3 to 4 numbers and letters are this alphanumeric known as a Turk code, or a time code, or a time utilization record keeping code. And so that tells us what kind of file it is. It's a 53 alpha. It's a 266 Oscar. It's a 148. And so there are these numbers, and they go through against this like really obscure list that is internal to the FBI, and it tells us it's a 415 Foxtrot. These are counterterrorism codes. These are counterintelligence codes. These are different types of crime. So it could be white collar, it could be fraud, it could be drugs and gangs, it could be, you know, what we call TOC West, transnational organized crime West. So they have all these delineations. You read on 53 is like an election crime. And so they have all these different little numbers, and I don't remember all of them. And like, you know, some of them designate Indian country, and some of them designate all the different things the FBI does. Some are administrative codes where it's like, well, you know, what is your time code utilized? It was me training for fitness, or it was me doing firearms training. So the first part of that FBI code is going to be what kind of case it is, and that could be from any field office. And then the second little two digits are going to tell you what field office it came out of, or more importantly, what division. So there are actually headquarters divisions that could be in there. Is it coming out of the director's office, the DO? Is it coming out of Washington field office, WF? Is it out of Chicago, CG? So each one of these little things tells you what they are, where they're out of. When you see New York, it's, you know, obviously it's NY. That's really easy to see. And so each of these little designations tells us a little bit about that code and about that case. And then there's a long string of like 7, 8 digits. And that's the actual case file number. And in theory, those are sequential. But as an FBI agent, when you open up a case, it might be like 111115. And the next one you open up is like 111127, because there's people who open cases in between there. You have no idea what the sequence looks like. You're just looking at numbers and you're like, okay, fine. That's my cases. And the work that I do in the computer system, which is called Sentinel, which the FBI spent millions and millions of dollars on, by the way. They spent way more money than they should have to do a file record keeping system, has all these different capabilities to cross-reference names. So you can do what's called indexing. So if I see Kyle Seraphin's name under a background check, it could also go into a Kyle Sarapin file about the counterterrorism investigation we're doing into Kyle Sarapin. Oh, he used to be an agent, and now we're mad at him. So we open up a 266 Oscar, and we say he's an anti-government guy. So they'll open that up. You click Kyle Sarapin, you'll get all the Kyle Sarapin files. Okay, so it's searchable. It's super searchable, where you can go into very specific records. So they have all these different levels of being able to look through it. But at the base level, it is a way that theoretically a law enforcement agency that also happens to have that sort of problematic piece that Kash was talking about, the intelligence side, can organize files in a meaningful way so that it has alpha numerics, it has delineations to where it's being handled out of, and then it tells you a specific number that goes to the records you're looking for. And does that all make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds exactly like how the file system works at a law firm, where you have a client number, then you have sub-files in there. You have different departments of the law firm, litigation, corporate, estates. And so you have one client with whatever. And so the idea is, however, that every file associates with a number, and every number associates with a file, and you don't have, call it a black file. Someone's working on a case that the law firm doesn't have any documentation of because it's off the books. I mean, that's the idea.
So that's the original idea. And you're 100% right on all that. Now, just like you'd find in a law firm, not everybody needs to be able to look at every case. In fact, it might actually be necessary that not everybody can see certain cases because they have a conflict of interest. The firm has decided, hey, we're going to represent this plaintiff, but there's a sort of overlap. So this section of the firm, or this office of the firm in New York versus Dallas, is going to handle different lawsuits. So we're going to actually draw kind of a Chinese wall between them. I don't know why they have that term, but I learned that in a legal show.
It's called, in French, it's a muraille de Chine, literally the Great Wall of China. But it's
great.
It's supposed to be a divider.
It's a divider, and it says, okay, so you don't have access to it, and so we do have files that might be access only. Now, there's two ways you can set that up. It can set it up so that if I'm a regular FBI employee and I go to any file that's in the system that's normal, I can add to it. I can add what's called a serial. I can open up somebody else's case file as a non-case manager, which is usually the case agent, or the co-case agent if there's more than one case manager. And I can just be a regular person, and I could say, I did an investigative lead. Let's say you're an agent in New York City, and you say, I need someone interviewed out wherever you are, Kyle. Could you go down to this person in Austin, Texas, and knock on this business door and ask them for records and see if they'll give them to us voluntarily? Or can you do an interview with the owner? Can you see if we can submit some video footage, whatever it may be? And I can go do that. Sure. So I'll go knock on the door of the business. I'll go talk to them, tell them who I am, get the thing, go gather whatever sort of information I have. Then I can come back and contribute it to that file because it's just a regular case file. And it'll be me as a non-case participant, which is another thing. So we have case managers, then we have the participants, and then you might just have like random people in the FBI adding information because it's a huge agency and One agent is just as good as another when it comes to going and asking a question. At least that's the way the FBI looks at it. So those are normal files. Then you might have ones where I can't add anything to it because I'm not a case participant and I'm not a case manager. And those are access controlled. So there's a roster of people that can add to it, but I can still find out that the file is there and I can still read through the file. I just can't add anything to it for some reason. They don't want anyone adding some outside stuff. So now we're getting to a slightly more restricted level, right? So far, you're with me?
Yeah, 1,000%. And
Okay.
I think everybody else is. I'm just following the chat to make sure. But yes, it's common sense. Sometimes you don't have access to all the files, depending on your rank at the FBI. There's some need to know stuff. At some point, in theory, however, there is an ultimate accountability or an ultimate traceability, and you don't have shadow files that exist unbeknownst and untraceable unless for some reason you happen to know.
We're still getting there. So there are files that not everybody can look at. Now, if they wanted to investigate you, David, if they want to investigate me, we have a media profile. So we might fall into what's called a sensitive investigative matter, which means that either we're an academic, a member of the media, we're a cleric, we are a politician. So if you have any of these types of people, there's a couple of other delineations, sensitive investigative matter. Project Veritas was one of those things, by the way. And one of my first whistleblower disclosures that went to Congress and then eventually put me in front of James O'Keefe to talk about it was this thing of a SIM. And when they do a SIM, a sensitive investigative matter, they do a new thing. They call it restricting the file. Now, restricting means that we can find it in a search. It exists in the search, but you can't look at what's in it. You can see the cover sheet. You can see who the case agents are that participate in case you want to access it, or if you want to reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to add something to your file, or I have something that might be useful to you, or hey, what the hell are you working on? Like, does it cross anything? I got a hit that said that it, maybe one of my subjects that I'm looking at is also in your case file, but your case file is restricted. And so can we compare notes? And so it's a reason that you could touch them, but you won't be able to see what's in it. But it's still searchable. It gives you a result. It'll pop up and then it'll just say, you can't see what's in this file. Only the people that are part of the access control roster can. So we've gone from open files where everybody can add to it and everybody can look at it. Then we have open files where everybody can look at it, but not everybody can add to it. Then we get to restricted files. And those are files that basically says that like everybody can search and find them, but not everybody can see what's in them if you're not an approved person, but you will get a hit on there. So if I were to search Kyle Sarapin's name and my name is in a restricted file, it would pop up that this case is ongoing and maybe even the serial or document where my name appears, but I won't be able to read it as a regular person unless I'm a participant. So I still have to reach out to the case managers. And for everyone's understanding, you basically can add people to a case in two ways. And this is actually going to be relevant. I'm going long form because it's the way to understand this. There are two ways you can add people to be a participant or a manager of a case. And this is super relevant right now because this is how I am understanding how this worked. You can add it as a name, the person's individual moniker, and they have a unique employment number, and that's associated with who they are and their identity and their login credentials. And it's usually associated with like their card that they have to put into the terminal. People who've been in the military will recognize this. Like you have to put in your CAC card. The FBI has a real simple thing. It's called a SAX badge, but you plug it into a card reader with like one of these little things like a chip. And it says that these are my credentials. So I am Kyle Sarapin sitting at this terminal.
And sorry to get a little juvenile. One is called the CAC. The other one is called the SAC.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Now, yes.
Common access card, and then I think secured access card. So yeah, of course you have to have an AC at the end of it. So the CAC and the SAC, those are very similar things, but not they're in the same family, but they are not the same, obviously.
Okay. So far we're at open, whatever, restricted. And then when you read this article and you read the words prohibited and you say, that's not a thing that I'm aware of.
That's not a thing. That's not a thing. That's what I read. I went, that's not a thing. And I reached out to my buddy who spent 12 years as a supervisor in the intelligence division, who did counterintelligence, counterterrorism, highly sensitive stuff, national level priorities, investigative stuff that were, my buddy George was the supervisor for the intelligence end on the Boston Marathon bombing case, which was about as big a case as there was in the country at that time. And so, he had priority access to certain things. He also was in charge of some fusion centers from the intelligence side. A lot of these things have like a law enforcement component and then an intel component. So you'll have a law enforcement FBI agent, badge and gun supervisor. And then you'll also have what's called an SIA or a supervisory intelligence analyst. So you've got these two sides of the coin because the FBI is this, dual-headed beast. And I asked him, I was like, hey, what about prohibited files? And he goes, no, that's not real. So then I had to ask again, and I had to start asking some other people. And I asked some people with some special knowledge. I asked people that spent a bunch of time working in headquarters doing things. And a prohibited file has none of those things. Now, as I just said, most ways that you would add people, if you want to add someone to approve the document, if you want to add someone to have access to something, you do so by giving them, by their unique identified employee number, their name. So again, their CAC or their SAC has to be able to log in, and it says Kyle Sarapin is being able to read this, and so he's added to this file. The second way you can do it is by what's called role, ROLE. So I could add my supervisor by name, but what if my supervisor is not around? And my supervisor is the approving authority, because you not only when you set up a case, do you set like who I am, I'm the agent, I'm the case manager. I'm going to add my co-case manager. So I have 2 case managers. I'm going to add all my intelligence analysts that work with me, and maybe my embedded analysts, which are known as, they have a different name. And so we could add them to it. And so I could have all these case participants. But what about the approving authority? Because whenever I write something, someone has to say yay or nay. Like, I read this, you don't have typos, it's good to go. That's the quality of work we want. Or they'd be like, hey, we don't actually investigate people who go to Latin Mass. I'm not going to approve this particular intelligence product that you want to add to your file, or whatever. You know, theoretically, there's a check and a balance. And so there's a chain of command above you that can approve it. Sometimes you need funding. You may need to go to the person above your boss, and that's called an ASAC. You're going to love this because the person above them is called a SAC. And then the person above that person is oftentimes, if you're in a big field office, called ADIC. So just to be as juvenile as humanly possible, ADIC is in charge of the SAC, which is in charge of ASAC, which is in charge of your SSA, which is in charge of you. So so that was my
SSA is ass spelt backwards. I mean,
That's
this is the jokes write themselves. Okay, so but now so you've got.
Well, I can add my SSA, my supervisor, as both the person. Let's say you're my supervisor. I can add David's name to the roles, but I can also add your role, which is supervisor of my squad. So I'm in charge. At squad 55. So criminal squad 55 supervisor, and whoever has got the kind of the reins that day. Let's say you're out sick. You pass over those authorities digitally to somebody else, then the next supervisor could sign off on it. And that's relevant in the story of Prohibited, because there are prohibited files that may never actually appear again. They may be gone forever, because if the people that created them, let's talk about what the prohibited file is, which took some digging. A prohibited file is like the island, or the Isla de la Muerta in the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a place that can only be found if the person already knows where to find it.
Well, as you see, I didn't get that analogy because I don't think I see. I think I had to have
I
seen
think there's
Pirates
something
of the
wrong.
Caribbean.
You're not going to be able to get citizenship of this country if you haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean.
I'll watch it.
All
But I more analogized it to like not a Rumble, but a Bitcoin wallet, that if you don't have the 12-seated password and the person who has it dies, no one will ever know it existed. No one will ever know it existed, and no one will ever be able to access it.
That's the same kind of lockup. Yeah, we're kind of dealing with this. Okay.
And so this is basically creating files that are as off the books as can be, only known of their existence to those who know of their existence, not discoverable by anybody, not auditable by anybody who doesn't know that they exist, and
without the link to the file. Without the actual, this is done with hyperlinks. So this is still done in a Windows environment where people are looking at this, they're looking at an app essentially that you open up, but it's familiar to people in the way that it works. There may be a hyperlink on somebody's name, and that means that there's an index file. So you can click on that and you'll see every single time they appear in any single file. And then you can see, is there a baseball card, which may have a picture and it may have some stats about them? Is there any record keeping that's associated, or visuals? And you can pull those up. So it's a hyperlinked environment, like a lot of different databases. And if you don't have the actual link to go to these files, then there's no way to know about them. And as I explained about, as you open up files sequentially, they open sequentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if I open up number 1 and somebody across the hallway opens up 2, and somebody who's in one of the satellite offices of my office opens number 3, and then I open up number 4, that's totally normal for me to get number 1 and number 4, even if I open back-to-back cases, because other people are opening cases all the time. So how would I know that they're not being done? And this is actually honing in on some of the problem of what this is. Now, apparently, it's been sort of like, I just reached out to a buddy of mine who's retired, and I said, did you know what a prohibited file is? And he said, yes. He said they used to be the paper files that they would use. I said, where do they come from and who has them? And he said, they're the purview of the deputy director, not the director. Okay. Now, I've made the argument to you a number of times. The deputy director runs the FBI, and the director of the FBI represents the FBI. they give like mottos and guidance. They get like Chris Ray used to come in and give these speeches that were really, really bad. They were like a Lifetime movie of like a crappy coach at a, someone's mom is getting beat up by some crappy boyfriend, and like the kid is a football player. And so the coach is giving him these like tackle hard, like do great stuff, like always go forward, or whatever nonsense bullshit he would do. And so Chris Ray was always kind of like this like D-level actor who would come in and give you these sort of pep talks that were really generic and boring and dumb. And I had no interest in going to him. I actually found myself in trouble because I found an excuse to go to a shooting range when he came to my office. So I was out like shooting in the desert when he was coming into the office to talk to everybody. So that's what the director does, though. For everyone to understand, that's Kash Patel. That's what Kash Patel does. He goes around, he kisses babies. He's a politician type. It's like people get excited about seeing him. They open the doors for him. He flies around with the security detail. He testifies in front of Congress. But the nuts and bolts of the FBI is run by the deputy.
And just to, I mean, I
and
know
that's
this
non-negotiable, by the way. That is what happens. So if anybody thinks that's not true or they don't understand, there's no investigations being done by a director. The people who run the FBI are the long-term management there. The people that manage that is supposed to be the director. But it's kind of like front-facing. The chain of command, when you look at the org chart, goes director, and the only person that reports to the director is the deputy director, and that's the most powerful position in the FBI, bar none. And below that is another person called the associate deputy director, and they also report to no one except the deputy. So not only does the director have a number two, the number two has a number two, which would be the number three, except they don't report to anybody except the deputy.
Yeah, and let me, I guess we're going to jump the one step ahead, but now that is to say there are some files that exist, I mean, almost quite literally only in the head of the deputy director. He knows
Correct.
that they exist. And if he doesn't impart that information on the next deputy director,
Correct.
the next deputy director will simply not know that those files exist. They won't know what was opened up surreptitiously or in a clandestine manner.
Correct.
And why would the leaving deputy director, or director for that matter, want to disclose their criminality to the incoming new team that wants to blow it out of the water?
Correct. All correct. Now there's two things that are dangerous, because that person who's running the program, the deputy director, could be added as an approving authority under the deputy director's role. In other words, the position of deputy director may have access to that file, unless the person was particularly devious and they only opened it up in their name. And the previous deputy director was Paul Abate. And Paul Abate was the weaponized version of the FBI that we are all most concerned about. He's the reason, I mean, I've been yelling his name and like nobody knows Paul Abate is the villain. Everyone called Chris Ray the villain. But at the end of the day, Paul Abate was like a pro-BLM, had sex scandals, like all the worst of the FBI senior management. And Paul Abate was the villain that really allowed a lot of this stuff to go along. But he was a hard leftist, as far as anybody can tell. And he was the reason why the problems that existed when I was there at the FBI were from Paul Abate.
It's amazing. Paul Abate was the one who did the testifying after the Butler assassination attempt.
Yeah, he sat there in a black tie and a black suit, and he just kind of basically told him, like, go F yourself. I don't have to tell you anything.
It's amazing. I'm just going through my living diary that is Twitter.
Yep.
And Abate said in the documents from 2019, 2020, when Crooks was 50 years old, it could provide, he had, Paul Abate seemingly lied about Thomas Crooks, but not to get there. I remember being displeased with Abate's transparency or honesty. Okay, fine.
Let me tell you just a story that I've heard, and I'm in no position to validate, but I've heard it from multiple sources. So this is an allegation, and let's leave it. I think that's what it is. But I'm gonna tell you the allegation that I got, and it seems very credible. There's a group in the FBI called Stagehand. And Stagehand is responsible for setting up the undercover identities and undercover companies and LLCs that are the sort of like shell companies for doing surveillance work and stuff like that. It's the organization that allows some of the sort of like more sensitive operations to take place at the Bureau. And that's just what it's called. It's called Stagehand. And one of the things that the FBI has, and this is not shocking to anybody, but they have a thing that's called AFID, the Alternate Federal ID. What is FID? Alternate Federal ID. Yeah. So AFID program. And so an alternate federal ID, and I resisted getting one of these, but they asked me to get one when I was doing surveillance. I don't know why I was like, I don't want to keep track of that. You're supposed to keep it in a secure vault at all times, but you can get a real, legitimate fake ID from the state government issued to you. You go to the state government and get your picture taken. You will have an address that is fictional. You will have a backstory that is fictional. You can get credit cards and credit records that are built up. You can have a passport. You can have all this wild stuff under an alternate federal ID, which looks exactly like you, which was scannable and is in the state database and says you are the person that you are when you're not that person. Okay? So just that exists. I'm just telling you it exists. It's a capability. That's not shocking. That's not shocking for an undercover.
No, you got to put people in witness protection, and that's exactly what goes into giving.
Well, this is like witness protection is the Marshal Service. They're doing a totally different thing. The FBI does it to be able to run undercover ops or low visibility surveillance, which is what I did for 3 years. Okay. Now, allegedly, Paula Bate went to the stagehand people and said, I need an alternate federal ID for my mistress who works for me, who I got pregnant and needs to be able to buy a house, and I'm going to buy a house for her, but I need to buy it under AFID so that it's not directly tracked back to me and her because I got someone pregnant that works for me. And that was not the first person that I heard that may have been a multiple instance thing, but that was one of the last things that I heard about him before he was eventually out the door. Paula Bate, by all accounts, from anybody that worked with him, was not a scrupulous man. That's Kyle Seraphin's opinion, lest any of us get sued for it. I just have the belief that he is not a good person. And everything I heard from anybody that worked around him said exactly that. Like nobody trusted him. And of course, your Twitter timeline, your living diary, says that you were displeased with his testimony. It was far worse than that, for whatever it's worth.
Okay, fine. So now, but getting into this discovery of the prohibited file that Kash Patel stumbled across, I guess the first question is, I don't know if you know who he fired. I presume you do, but I don't
know who he fired, actually. So the Fox News story covered that they were supervisory people. There were some analytical types that were involved as well, and then probably some professional staff or support staff. So I don't know the names, and I don't know if they were the persons that are really to blame. But
the question is, did Patel prior to this know of the practice within the FBI of prohibited files?
Apparently, some people know about it and know that it's sort of like a legendary thing, but I just talked to a buddy, and here's where it gets really problematic for me, because I'm willing to give Patel credit for calling this thing out, but this is actually evidence that the FBI needs to be shut down.
I mean, that was the question in the chat. Say, okay, if he calls it out now, but then what is
it has to be shut down? And here's why. Look, there's a concept in intelligence. This is an outgrowth of 25 years worth of fusing intelligence into the FBI, and it has no business being there. You can be the spy hunting agency and not be an intelligence agency, but we have a directorate of intelligence at the FBI. There is an entire division in most of the big field offices that do nothing but pure intelligence, and there are people that answer to the Directorate of National Intelligence. They work for Tulsi Gabbard by priority, but their paycheck comes from the FBI, but they don't work for the FBI. They're dual-hatted, really. And so you have people that are serving a dual master. And the legacy of putting a bunch of people that really ought to belong over at ODNI, or they should belong at CIA or NSA or DIA or one of the other, whatever it is, 14 other intel agencies where they really ought to be, by putting them inside the FBI and bringing that mindset. There's a concept of a sub rosa operation. And I learned about this from one of my buddies who was an NSA. Sub rosa is a deniable operation that people have seen in freaking movies. Of course, they're real. That's not shocking to people. But the idea that I, as a supervisor, approve you as my employee to go accomplish a mission, and I don't want to know what you did, and I don't want to know how you did it, and I don't ever want to be able to find out how you did it. I'm going to give you a authorization that is basically operational eyes only. So only the people inside of the thing that you are doing will know about it. And I will never be able to query it. I will never be able to audit it. I'll never be able to see what you did. I just know whether or not we had a mission success. And the answer should just be kind of like a thumbs up in the hallway when you walk by. So a sub rosa operation is something that our overseas intelligence agencies do, which is fine. We do all kinds of spooky and sketchy stuff overseas. The difference is you can't have that in your law enforcement agency that's responsible for, we talked about law firms at the beginning. Law firms, especially ones involved in criminal law, receive discovery. And that system that we talked about, that file system, has a button on every major file that is a prosecutable case under a criminal statute. And you hit export discovery, and it is meant to give everything except the 6E grand jury stuff. It gives everything that is legally entitled to go over to the defense. Because in our system, theoretically, the FBI doesn't care whether or not you're convicted or not. They care about due process. They care about actually following the Constitution. They care about not going and violating attorney-client privilege and coercing or getting consent for an attorney to go in and entrap their client in a phone call that's not known to be recorded. That shouldn't exist.
So the bottom line from this article, and bearing the lead whether or not they even know it's there.
I don't
Kash
think
Patel-
they know, man. I'm just telling you, I read the Fox News and it's like regular people in the FBI that spent less than a decade there wouldn't know. The people that have been around for a long time have heard ghost stories of it. And I ended up talking to a retired agent a few minutes ago, just like literally as you were going live. And I go, do you know what this is? And he goes, of course. And I go, do you know how they're used? And he goes, yeah. And I go, would you have known about that? Here's the problem. And this is why I'm kind of ambivalent about what the Kash Patel answer is. I'm more than willing to give credit for calling it out. It needs to be very aggressively fleshed out, maybe a full press conference on it. Patel asked the friend that I was talking to be his deputy director in January of 2025.
That is to say, a year ago.
Before he was confirmed. He said, if I am confirmed or when I am confirmed, will you be my deputy director? And my friend agreed to it. And my friend would have known about this problem. Mm-hmm. And he would have known to go look for it.
And now so Kash Patel has come out now, discovered that the FBI was violating constitutional rights. I mean, to put it mildly,
it's questionable. Like certainly the thing with the attorney definitely looks like unconstitutional. I don't know under what circumstances you can do that or what sort of approvals they did to get it done, but that's super sketch. But if you thought nobody would find out, maybe you would do something illegal.
But for sure, if you thought like
look, getting toll records on somebody, if you have a logical investigative purpose and you've articulated it, you get a subpoena, like that happens. Look, the FBI investigated me the same way they did Kash Patel. They went after my social media. They went after my Gmail. I found out about it 9 months after they closed the case. People can go find it in my Twitter. I actually put the email I got from Google notifying me that I had been served with a subpoena and that they went and they raided my stuff. So they have all my emails and they've done all my communications. And so they do this stuff. And there's no criminal activity I've ever been involved in that would involve the FBI investigating it. There's no allegation or information that I was involved in criminal activity. So that was completely an attempt to come after me under the previous administration. I wouldn't put it past this administration just because I'm kind of a thorn in their side. But if we're being totally honest, like they have maybe a legal justification for doing so. It doesn't make it good for this country, but it still could be legal. There's plenty of things that you and I won't like that are still legal. I don't know about the attorney-client privilege thing. I've never heard that one being done.
It's wild. But now, just the throwaway sentence. Patel also said he recently ended the FBI's ability to categorize files as prohibited. So this, to me, it illustrates it's not just a colloquial term. It's not just semantics. It's a practice, and now it might be time to explain to the public what that practice means. Is there no backdoor entry? Like, is there no way of finding out which of these prohibited files exists without the cooperation of those who created it or surveilled it, but who wouldn't want to disclose it because it would reveal their own criminality?
So that's the biggest problem. And now we're getting into a speculative term or a speculative sort of space here. The only way that you would be able to find these, and the reason why I gave such a detailed answer about how you open these files up in the first place is, in theory, you would be able to query, if you had full system access, the master list of every case that is opened under a certain heading by a certain field office. And so those numbers, those specifics, the alphanumeric aside, the field office aside, there is a number that is assigned. And by the way, it is in like the tens of millions of total cases. I mean,
I would imagine plus cases plus subfiles.
It's like 9 digits long, or 8 or 9 or 10 digits long. It's crazy long. I can't even remember how many it is, but we could find one online, and they're not short. So we're talking about millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of file cases that have been opened and closed over the years. The only way to query which one of these things don't show up in our databases is to take all of them, stack them in a row, and find out which ones are missing. And this is the way you do any kind of like brute force audit. Yeah, well, you go and you find...
You could do this with, with AI
could do it
pretty easily, because you're going to cross-reference the numbers to the files, and where there is one that's missing and another that's existing, that something's up. But then what do you do with that information?
No, it's worse than that. Okay, it's worse than that, because the AI would have to go in and be able to have access to the FBI's file servers, which has some of the most secure stuff in the world. It's got top secret cases that are opened. It's got secret cases. The basic case that's even unclassified is still opened on the secret servers. So everything the FBI does by default is at a secret level. Even if the stuff is unclassified, it's all stored on what's called the enclave, the computer system that handles up to including secret. So you're already going to have to give AI whatever platform it is. You'd have to really write your own AI to be able to do this. It doesn't mean you couldn't get it done, but you would have a brute force attack to be able to list out every single number, find out which ones do not appear. And then you'd have to find out, well, were they opened under name or they opened under role? And I think the faster way to do this would be to grab some of these people that we know were involved in it. And certainly the previous deputy director, not Bongino, but before him, would have been the person. And you'd have to freaking black site these people, because that's the kind of stuff that I've been running back and forth with my buddies who are still in the bureau. I'm like, we'd have to black site these MFers. There's only one way to make that happen. You have to torture the shit. Black site them.
Black site, what does that mean?
We have to extract them from the United States and the U.S. territorial controls, take them into an extrajudicial area, and then start waterboarding them until we find out what it is. Like, and maybe other torture as well. My point to you is that, like, no one's going to voluntarily say, "Hey, we did this thing," and it was plausible deniability. But this, do you remember the movie Clear and Present Danger, which was done a Harrison Ford flick?
Yes, but that's back in the day. I mean, I haven't.
It is back in the day. It's really good. Of course, there's like the CIA and there's all these kind of like interplays there. This was all written by Tom Clancy. You know, the books are also very good. But the idea is that there's a blank letter that this guy has in his file, and his name was like Ritter or Richter or something like that. And he had it in the file. And it was a congressional. It wasn't a presidential finding. It was his get out of jail free card, which was that the president wrote him a letter on a typewriter that just said, you know, carry out these actions, whatever you need is necessary. You know, sign president. And he put it in a file, and that was his get out of jail free card. And in theory, the director always has plausible deniability because they don't know that the sub rosa files or these prohibited files exist. They do this in other intel agencies, and we don't really care that much if we can't get full accountability overseas because it's like, they're not us. You should really, really, really care if the FBI is doing it. Or as my buddy who did, you know, he used to work for NSA. He spent a bunch of time at the Bureau, worked in military intelligence, said, his statement was, we thought there were two FBIs. One is the law enforcement entity that everybody sees on TV and everyone thinks they're the good guys. And that's kind of like the little brother FBI. There's the real FBI, which is the intel agency that works there and does counterintelligence and counterterrorism and a bunch of dumb stuff that are like non-predicated, you know, intelligence only investigations that are never going to result in criminal. They're just about like finding out stuff. And then apparently there's a third FBI. And that's the one that no one knew was doing the thing. And when you and I were talking, it's like the room that meets in the freaking X-Files, like where the guys are sitting and smoking cigarettes and deciding up what they're going to do to screw over or run like American politics.
It is the weaponized criminal branch of the FBI that operates off the books and nobody even knows it. But for this, now the question is this, and I said it.
The crazy thing is that this story doesn't make that allegation, which is and that is exactly what that word means. And it didn't take a ton of digging, and so there must be other reporters, certainly not at Fox News, but you'd think that there'd be reporters that would go and want to ask their FBI sources, "Hey, what the hell's a prohibited file?" And everyone just kind of brushed over it, just like you probably did. You read it, and like they put it in quotes. It made me go like, "That's not a thing." Until you find out it's a thing, and it actually scares the shit out of me.
Well, like, I mean, it confirms what we all already thought. You know, that they run these secretive, illegal spy operations for political purposes to go after their adversaries, and it's off the books. And you know, it's beyond a need to know. You don't know it exists unless you know it exists.
So you don't need to know is what it really comes down to. That's what these things are. I don't want to know is how you build a file like this. And here's what really bugs me about it. One of my buddies made the comment. And it was a really straightforward comment. He goes, like, people could theoretically retire out of the FBI and then those files would never be accessible unless you were able to brute force attack it or hack your own system. And I don't know what sort of safeguards are built in, but in theory, the way the system is built in, it's fairly robust because you're not supposed to be able to get to things you're not supposed to get to because there's either national security stuff at stake or there's criminal prosecution, which could, you know, there are certain things that are meant to be and have to be kept away from everybody, hence the tiered levels of access. And so if the access is nobody knows it exists, nobody can know it exists, and the only way you could find it is if you were to find the number, again, Isla de la Muerta style, and the name, instead, if it was opened under, let's say, a Paula Bate or a David Bowditch, who were the previous director or the deputies, if it was under their names and not under the role of deputy director, how would they even know where to find it?
And even if Kash Patel, as he says, we're going to, you know, end this policy, he recently said it, nothing. This
is like a 30 or 40 or $50 million software program that's been deployed to like 56 field offices and hundreds of FBI locations across multiple enclaves. So both top secret or what used to be called SIMPRNet. Their SIMPRNet is like the lower level. They call it BUNet in the FBI. And there's like Scion, which is the top secret side, or other people have different names for it. But the yellow side of the top secret terminals. This is rolled out across all these places. It took years to build, and it has this functionality. So you can't disable the functionality unless you're going to go in and delete the code. And I'm pretty confident, based on like working on government systems, if you were to delete that code, you probably break the whole thing, which means the FBI no longer works. But I'm just saying, you can outlaw the practice. The next guy comes in and turns the practice back on.
Yeah, well, that was it. That's the bottom line conclusion. So we'll see what Kash Patel does with this news, and we'll see what, if I'm Susie Wiles, I'm burning the building down right now. We'll see. It's shocking. It's shocking, and it requires other people's level of expertise, which you bring to the table, Kyle.
Hey, let's give the guy credit for saying it. I hope that he knows what he was saying, but I hope he also knows that it means that you've actually proven the point that we were making and that he was making prior to going there. This is the ring of power, whether you like it or not, as the Lord of the Rings analogy. The fact is that governmental power, godlike type power, is to be able to do things that no one else can do, and that no one can ever account. As you said, unaccountable power is really what the ring represented, right? Because when you were invisible, nobody could make you pay for what you did. You just did whatever you wanted. And additionally, that, the stronger the capability, the more you can wield it. If you have an unauditable, unaccountable bureaucracy working inside of an intelligence agency that has badges and guns and can set you up and kill you or send people into your house or whatever else, that must be thrown into the fire. And the sad thing is whenever I've brought that up with other people who are prior FBI guys, like, they all have this aversion. They're like, oh, well, we can't get rid of it. It has some core functions. Well, then you have to destroy it to the point where you can reconstitute the decent functions somewhere else. But I would never go back and buy something from a restaurant where I got food poisoning. They changed the name on purpose. They tell you it's under new management and it may be in the same physical location, but you got to rebrand. You can't have a brand that has done something that is so toxic that nobody will ever associate that brand without looking at it and going, oh, that's that toxic thing that might kill you. So I haven't heard that. And I would like to see that. And more importantly, he hasn't taken back this agency. If we're just hearing this today and the story broke yesterday, let's just do some sort of analysis of it. And that's not saying that's his fault. It's saying that the person who was his deputy in Bongino could not have done this, would not have known this. I didn't know this. I said, I got 8 times as much time in the FBI as Bongino. That's not a flex. That's just an accurate fact about the numbers. He was there 9 months. I was there for 6 years while I was getting paid. So take those numbers and look at them and you go, okay, well, if someone who's been there 6 years didn't know, if someone who's been there 12 years doesn't know, if someone who's been there 15 years, like my buddy Phil, doesn't know, and he did time in headquarters, it means it's a narrow subset of people who do know. And by the way, Kash actually asked that person to come in and be his deputy. And that would have been one of the first things he went after. Because when I asked him about it, he started laughing. He was like, why do you think I wanted to try to fix this? So the people who understood the problem are not in charge. The fact that Kash is there calling it out, great. We need to blow this thing up as big as possible to talk about that word, what it means, and what the capabilities actually insinuate about this agency. And then we have to really put it on the table that it doesn't need to exist. We don't need a Federal Bureau of Investigation in that format. And reconstituting it under new management, whatever that looks like, even if Kash is in charge of it, it shouldn't have the intel component, which he talked about going all the way back to Sean Ryan, going back to Glenn Beck. I'm struck by this moment. People remember it. He sat and talked to Glenn Beck, and they said, who has the black book, the Jeffrey Epstein black book? And he goes, the FBI. It's under direct control of the FBI director. That's probably not true. It's probably under direct control of the deputy director, if we're being totally honest. And so Glenn Beck's statement to him was, that is Hoover level blackmail capabilities. We used to hear that there were paper files that Hoover kept that were just Hoover's files. That is the predecessor to these prohibited type files, where just the people who run the FBI have access to it. And of late, the FBI has taken on a political figurehead called a director, and the deputy has been the most powerful person since Hoover. That's always been the case. I mean, that's who Deep Throat was. It was a deputy director of the FBI. There's a long history of that role having people in it that serve the FBI above any other master, which it does turn out is something I've been saying for a long time here. And I keep trying to make people understand it. And, it's nuanced, but I appreciate you listening through it.